Hey everyone, Todd from Sideshow Effects once again, and in this video I'm going to show you the installation and a bit of navigation on our Photoshop Pro Profiles for the Stream Deck Plus device, and this is version 3. Now we've kind of overhauled a lot of the functions inside of this pack now and added some cool new things. Now most of the actions in this profile are driven by the Photoshop plugin. That allows us to create a lot more commands for you, as well as you will now have some direct control with your adjustment layers for brightness and contrast and the hue, saturation, and lightness. And we'll get into that and demonstrate how that works. As always, there's a very comprehensive PDF that's in the pack. We always recommend you follow that when doing your installation process, as it has the most up-to-date information, more so than this video may have. So with our version 3 of this pack using the Photoshop plugin, it means that you are no longer bound by keyboard shortcuts. And what that means to you is if you have your own customized key file set, you no longer need to load ours and use it. You can continue to use your own customized set, and the commands in this profile will work fine. In addition, you're no longer bound to be using an English keyboard layout or a German keyboard layout, etc. the way previous versions did. This pack now is universal. It doesn't matter where you are in the world, what keyboard layout language that you're using, or even what language of Photoshop software you're using. This pack will work with all of those. So let's start the installation process. We've got some actions and some brushes in this pack that we want to load in. And we're going to put them in a very specific place. Now I'm on a Mac right now, and I'll show you where these files go on the Mac, and then we'll just quickly switch over to the Windows and show you where they go in the Windows. Other than that, all the other instructions in this video pertain to both systems. So once again, we're on the Mac, and the location for the actions and the brushes will be under your hard drive, users, your username, library, application support, Adobe, your version of Adobe Photoshop. I'm working in 2025 at the moment. Presets, and you'll see that we have our actions folder here. Now on the Windows system, the path is users, your username, app data, roaming, Adobe, and your version of Adobe Photoshop, and the presets folder. That's where you will drop these files on the Windows system. So let's open up our actions from our Sideshow Effects download. You can see we've got 12 customized actions here. We would drag and drop these into our actions folder. I already have them in here. And same thing with the brushes. So you have the brushes here, you would drag that brushes file into your brushes folder. Now with those loaded, let's go into Photoshop. You would load them directly into the actions and the brushes panel. So if we go to my actions panel, you can see I already have them loaded here, but what you would do is you would click on the flyout menu, you would say load actions. You would load them from that location that you just dragged the files to, and you can see my actions are here, so I can shift select these and I would say open, and they would open up in my actions panel. Same thing with the brushes. You can see I already have mine here, but if they weren't loaded, go to the flyout menu, import brushes, and you would go to the brushes folder and import this particular file. Now let's go back to our pack, and we've got a plugin in here. This is our MouseMove plugin. Allows us to control some of the parameters inside of Photoshop. So with your Stream Deck software open, you would double click this file and it would load in. I already have mine loaded. You can see it right here. It's under mouse. Now the next thing we want to do is load up the Photoshop plugin. So I'm going to click on the Marketplace and make sure that you're logged in to your account on the Stream Deck Marketplace. And we're going to go to just type in Photoshop here. And you see under plugins, we have the Adobe Photoshop. We're going to click on this, and if you don't have it installed, you will see a large blue Get button when you're signed in. Tap on that and it will self-load it into your Stream Deck software. I have the plugin loaded, which is why it's telling me to open in Stream Deck, because it's already installed. And you can double check that you have it installed by going to your preferences, going to plugins, and you can verify that it is indeed there. Now we'll be demonstrating how you can customize this profile a little later on. That's why we've provided the icons in this pack to give you access to all the icons we've created for Photoshop. So if you're creating new commands, likely you will find the appropriate icon that goes with that command. And how you would install these, there's two different ones. One's for labeled and one is unlabeled. You simply, with your Stream Deck software open, double click this and it will install into the Stream Deck icon library. And I'll show you what that looks like when we get into the customize section. So the next step we're going to do is import the profiles themselves. So we'll go into the Sideshow Effects folder here that you downloaded, go into Profiles, and you can see we have Windows and Mac. They're divided between Windows and Mac systems, and they're almost identical. There's just a few subtle differences between the two, which is why we've divided them up. So if you're on a Windows system, you would take these 10 Stream Deck profiles and load them into your software. I'm on the Mac currently, so I would take these 10, and when we shift select them and double click with our Stream Deck software open, they will load into our Stream Deck software. So once they're installed, we can take ourselves to the main profile, and you can access it by pulling down the menu, going to main, opening it up. Now you see the main page has 8 switch profile keys here. What these will do when they're set up, they will open the other profiles. So in this case, once it's all set up, clicking on this on our device would open up the photography profile. But the way Stream Deck is currently configured, when we export these profiles, it doesn't retain the links that we've built for them. So you need to relink those back to each other. It's a very easy process, so I'll demonstrate it now. So if we click on Photo, you can see down here it tells us that when I click that, it is going to open the profile Photoshop Photography Stream Deck Plus version 3, which is exactly where we want it to go. Yours won't read that. Yours will say something different. It'll say some other profile that's on your system. So just to make sure that it's correct, you would open this drop down and you would select the Photography Stream Deck Plus version 3. So when I go to my Stream Deck device and press on Photo, you can see it launches the photography profile for me. Now since we're here, you can see that we've got a main key. This needs to take us back to where we were. So we would click on it, and under Profile, we would select the Photoshop Main Stream Deck Plus version 3 to take us back to the profile we were just at. So that when I go to my device and press on Main, it takes me back to that main page. Now we will need to set that for each one of these. So very quickly, Paint would go to the Painting Profile, Design, Styles, Manage, Adjust, Filters, and Swatches. So once again, you would go in each one of these and make sure that the profile that is going to be launched reads just as we've demonstrated here. And then of course you'll need to go into each one of these profiles. Since they're linked on the main profile, you can just get to it by pressing it on your device. Now we're in the Painting Profile. Click on Main, direct it back to the main. And you'll do that for each one of these. Just take you a few seconds to just relink those. Now if we go into the Photography profile and we advance to page 7, there is this Filters switch profile key as well. So we want to make sure that this one goes to the Filters profile. And then we'll go to the Painting profile, open it up, go to page 4. You'll see there's a Swatches switch profile. Make sure it goes to the Swatches profile. We'll go to the Design profile now. Go to page 7. There's another Swatches folder. Make sure it goes to Swatches. Now one additional one in the Adjust profile. If we go to page 6, you'll see that we have an HSL switch profile. We're going to make sure it opens the HSL profile when we click on it. And of course, in the HSL profile, you want to send it back to where we just were. And in this case, it will be in that Adjust profile, and it will be going to page 6. So when I click on that, it takes me back to the Adjust profile on the page that I just came from. So let's start with the photography profile. We can jump to it with our device, and we're going to explore what this profile provides us. Now, as you can see, we have some command keys along the top. We can create a new layer, adjust layer visibility, etc. As mentioned in the intro, these are no longer driven by shortcut commands. Instead, they are driven by the Photoshop plugin. You can see from the drop down here that it is create new layer from the Photoshop plugin. We at Sideshow Effects have greatly expanded the capability of the plugin to allow us to control just about any command that's in Photoshop. Take, for example, this auto tone, which is not natively available through the Photoshop plugin, but through our actions we have created all of the menu commands, and this one's just organized for the image menu, and we have included just about all of the commands there. So this one is now specified for auto tone under the image menu. So when you press on that, it will perform that function. Now we've got 10 pages here in this profile, and we'll quickly just move through the pages, but I want to spend a little more detail on the dials themselves and what their function is. So the first dial, as you can guess, is our zoom function. So this is using the Photoshop plugin, and it's giving a real-time update of our percentage. And there is a little bit you can adjust with this plugin. As you can see, we've got a step size here set at 20%. Whenever we step, we can adjust this up or down to our liking, so we can change the behavior of the zoom function as we rotate. Second dial, of course, is the rotation. It'll allow us to rotate our image. Third dial allows us to adjust our opacity of the currently active layer, and the fourth dial allows us to undo. So we can swipe to the second page. You can see we get more commands. We have 8 more commands on the top. Our dial keys are mostly the same. You see the second dial has changed from rotation to now it gives us a layer navigation. So let's say I duplicate the layer, duplicate it a few times, and use my navigation. So my navigation can now select. Now if we move to page 3, a lot of select functions. Page 4 gives us a set of tools that we can work with that may be related to photography. In previous versions, you might recall that our tools were available on the dial strip, and we could use the dials to rotate between the different classes of a tool, such as eraser, where you can see we have the eraser tool, background eraser, and magic eraser tool. We had the ability to just cycle between them. Now we can select our specific tool directly because the plugin now allows us to select specific tools. And now is a good time to point out a little customizing tip, that these are all driven by the Photoshop plugin. Should you decide you never use background eraser, for example, and you want something different here, let's say you just want to use the pencil tool. I can click on the pull down here, I'll type in pencil, and it'll just filter it for me, and I'll select the pencil tool. Now you see it doesn't change the icon. The icon does not come with the Photoshop plugin itself. That is something we have to load in ourselves. So I can quickly go over here into the Stream Deck icon library, and because I installed the Photoshop icons, I can just do a search across my entire library for pencil. It'll filter it for me, and here's the one I'd want, so I click on that and it'll change it for me. So you can very quickly customize the tools that you want to use and put them where you want to use them. And if you wanted to, you can just click and move these tools wherever you like them. I'm going to change that back. So let's talk about the dials now on this page. You can see we have a couple of brush controls. So with my brush active, you can see I have a very large size brush here, and we can size it down by rotating. You can see that we get a real-time readout of the size on our device, so that we can then do our painting as we need it. Let's shut these other layers off so you can see what we're doing. So we can do our painting, and we can use the second dial to increase or decrease the hardness of our brush. Now if we advance to this page, we get some more tools. The brushes stays the same. We have the rotation dial back. More commands you might find useful in a photography workflow. So we have a couple of generative commands there, as well as we have an access to our filters profile on this page. And we'll get into the filters in more detail a little later. Swiping again, we have some grids and guides, rulers, etc., that sort of thing that you might find useful in your photography workflow. Now on this page we have some adjustment layers. So on this page we're able to control some of the parameters in these adjustment layers. Let's say I use a black and white adjustment layer. You can see the parameters open up in my properties panel. Now what I can do with my mouse, I'm going to click on the first one here in red. So I'm clicking on the value box here to highlight it. And then by using the first dial, this allows me to make the adjustment for that parameter. Using the second dial allows me to select which one of these parameters gets adjusted. So let's say I want to check the affect the green channel. No greens in this image. Let's go to magentas because I think the flowers are kind of rosy. So we can make that adjustment. Just by bouncing between these two, we can quickly access different parts of our parameter very quickly and easily. And that will work for any one of these. All you have to do is click on the value box first of any one of them, and then you can move around and make your adjustments. Now the next page features the same controls, except you'll see a difference when I make my adjustments here. It's a finer control. So whereas before on the previous page it's a coarse control, in this case it's working by factors of 10. When I swipe to the next page, it's a finer control and it's moving by factors of 1. And you can still adjust between the two. So if you need a fine adjustment, you use this. Coarse adjustment, you use the blue one. Now this will also work for the floating window effects. As an example, let's say brightness and contrast. You can see it's highlighted there. I can make my adjustments very quickly and easily. And tapping on the screen enters that value. And one more swipe takes us back to the main page. So that's the photography profile layout. Now if we go into painting, it's organized for more of a paint workflow. So it gives us a few of our standard commands. We can add a layer mask. We can switch our foreground and background very quickly. We can set it to a default of foreground, background, black and white. So if I had different colors here, I can just press and get us back to our default black and white. Now you see we have brushes on. We're going to have some more options of brushes on this, being that it's a painting profile. So the same size and hardness controls you see on dials 1 and 2. We also have access to an angle. So let's say that we are working with an oval brush. I can change the angle of our brush with this dial. And you can also see that we can adjust our flow. You can see up at the top here, our flow will change. Swiping over to the next page, you see the fourth dial changes from flow to smoothness. So I can increase the smoothing of my brush. So selection functions, and we have access to opening up our panels very quickly, flipping our image. We can open up our swatches panel if it isn't open. And we also have our Swatches profile available to us. Once again, we're going to go into this in more detail. We'll cover that when we get to it. And we have a series of tools that we can use that are painting related. We have some layer options here. And we have some brushes, some preset brushes that we've put in here that at a click of a button, let's say I'm working with this particular brush and I want to change quickly to just an oval. That will change it for me, or this brush here, soften that brush, etc. That gives us a few brushes that we can work with. Now on this page, we have some preset color foreground and backgrounds that we can call up at the press of a button. Pressing this, pressing these will bring up the colors that you see presented here, but you're not restricted by the colors we've just put in there, because each one of these, when clicked on, we can change the foreground and background to whatever color we want. So let's say clicking on this, I want, say, this pink, and I'll just move to a different, say, a darker mauve. So now I have those, and you can see the icon actually will update, and of course in Photoshop, when we click on that, it'll change our foreground and background to it. So you can create your own bank of colors, whatever you're working with, and change them whenever you need to. So now let's swipe over to page 10 of the painting profile, and you'll see that we have a number of different color-related controls that we can use here. Along the top, you can see we can switch, when our color pane's active, we can switch between the different modes of the color pane. We can go to the CMYK, HSB, or the LAB sliders. Let's just work on RGB for a second here, and I'll show you how this works. Now, that doesn't work out of the box. We need to do a quick little setup of this, but it's a very straightforward process. So you will take your cursor, place it over the value box of red, with red selected here. We're going to push in the first dial until we see location saved. We'll do the same thing with green and blue. Let's tap on green first. Move our cursor to the green value box, press and hold on the dial, and then same thing with blue. Click on blue, move our cursor to the blue value box, push in the dial, and see location saved. Now you can see whichever one is selected with the green triangle and it's slightly highlighted. In this case we have red selected. That means when we rotate the dial, it will now adjust that value, and we can then jump to green. So you can quickly dial in the color you want using your Stream Deck device. And the same thing will be true with the CMYK settings. We switch it to CMYK, and we can move our cursor over top of the cyan. Let's press cyan. We should press cyan first, and then location saved. Click on magenta. Yellow. And then black. And now these are available for us to adjust. You don't need to assign these all at once. If you never work in HSB or LAB, you don't need to assign them. If you find in future that you do have a project that requires you to use one of those, you can then just assign it at that time. Now the keys on the bottom here will take us into dedicated pages for those color spaces, and instead of it being divided between one dial, we now have the red, green, blue. In this case, each has its own dial. Now, as before, we do need to set these up very quickly, so let's go back to the RGB, and we'll cursor over the red, the green, and the blue. And now we can bounce between them. So you can do the same thing if you're working in the different color spaces. Let's say I'm working in CMYK, I would need to assign these as well, just the same procedure as before. So that's the painting profile. Let's go back to the main, and we can look at our design profile. Same idea, except this time the keys are relating to doing digital design work, for example. We have some text controls here. The first dial, of course, is going to increase or decrease the size of our selected text. Second dial will adjust our overall tracking. And let's actually do a line break in here so that we can adjust our leading. And we can expand or contract our selection with the fourth dial. We have some document controls, so with our document above 100%, we can move our canvas horizontally or vertically when we're working on it. Let's say that we have just an object on a layer here. I can adjust the layer's contents horizontally or vertically. And we put a few brushes in here for you to work with, as well as access to color controls, swatches, and the swatch profile itself. Put in some of the adjustment layer controls that you've seen, along with parameter control. Some color controls with your different paint brushes, some tools for you to use, and back to the first page. Okay, now we'll take a look at the styles profile here. And you can see on the first page we have the ability to apply a couple layer styles. We can see we've got Bevel and Emboss here. So with my layer selected, I press Bevel and Emboss, and our layer style panel shows up. And we'll need to make some assignments on this to be able to control the various aspects of this. So first of all, we can take a look at the keys that we've got here, and we have 4 keys that we can make assignments to. Looking over here, we have our global light. This allows us to turn on and off the global light. So if I take my cursor over top of the global light checkbox, press and hold this key, and then see the green check mark, and that will allow me at any time to press that key to turn the global light on and off. Same thing can be done with the preview. Mouse over preview checkbox, press and hold, and the same thing with the radio buttons for up and down, up and down. Now those are available. So turning your attention to the dials, you can see in the first dial we have depth, size, and softness. So if we mouse over the value box of depth, for example, and with depth selected, and you can see it's selected because it's highlighted and has the green triangle, we press in and hold the dial button until we see location saved. That location has been saved for that parameter. Let's press on size on the dial screen. To make it active, move our cursor over top of the size value box, press and hold in the dial to see location saved, and then we can move to soft, mouse over the soften value box, press and hold the dial, and see location saved. Now we have those values are saved on this dial, and we can adjust them as we need them. And you can go through. Dial 2 has the angle and altitude, which you would make the assignment, and the same thing with highlight, opacity, and shadow on dial number 3. So you see on this page we also have the stroke layer style that we can apply, and we have the ability to set a parameter for size and opacity, and you would use the same technique for assignment on those values. So page number 2 shows us drop shadow and inner shadow. Once again, you would make those assignments as you need them. And keep in mind, you don't need to make these assignments right away. If you never use any of these layer styles, you can just leave them and don't bother assigning them. If you find in the future that you are starting to use a layer style more often and you want to make the assignment, you can do it at that time. You don't have to do them all at the same time. So we have inner glow, outer glow, and we have gradient overlay, satin, and pattern overlay. And then this page gives us some command functions that are related to layer styles, and then back to page 1. Now under Manage, some handy commands for us to manage our documents. and we can get into adjust. Now adjust allows us to adjust the parameters of effects that we apply. Now on the first page you can see we have brightness, contrast, levels, etc. So if we want to just apply brightness and contrast, and we can quickly make our assignment here, take our mouse, cursor over the value of brightness, push in our dial, same thing with contrast. And now I can bounce between these two values using my Stream Deck device to make the change. Pushing in the dial will enter that value. I'll apply that again just to open it up to show you that we also have a preview box. We can mouse over this and we can apply the preview key to that. Now the same can be true of levels. You have access here on the second and third dial for the different level controls. Consult your PDF for the exact location of where you need to make these assignments. Exposure is on this page. Here we have shadows, highlights, vibrance, etc. These will allow you to control the different parameters. Now over on page 5, this is where we start to see our layer adjustments versus just our image adjustments. And you'll notice that we have the brightness and contrast layer adjustment. So we add that with the click of the key, and you can see under properties we have the two brightness contrast parameters. So the first dial will allow us to make our adjustment. And if I push in the dial quickly, it will change to the contrast control. So now I can just bounce back and forth between my brightness and contrast with the one dial. And you can see the readout on the device. Now for levels and exposure on this, this is still the old-fashioned way of us being able to control it. Apply our levels control and say, for example, input black, mouse over that area of input black, and we can press and hold, and then that will allow us to make that adjustment. So you would assign these keys should you need to use them. Next page we see we've got hue saturation here. So let's just apply a hue saturation adjustment layer, and you see it in our properties. The first key will allow us to adjust the master hue. So just by rotating, you can see we can make our change. Pressing in allows us to adjust saturation. Pressing in again allows us to adjust our lightness. And once more it takes us back to the hue. Now that's really good for a global change of your image, but if you need more detail, that's why we have the HSL profile embedded in here. Now you can see instead of having the hue, saturation, and lightness for the master stacked into one dial, we have it spread between the three dials, along with a handy undo redo dial at the fourth. So now I can make my adjustments with this, and I can also use two hands to dial in the adjustment that I need. Now the keys here, along the top you can see the red, green, blue key. What these will do is they will navigate us to different parts of this profile. So this page is controlling the master. If we go to the red, it changes to the red page of this profile, and you can see we're on the red page because it's highlighted there. And as you can see from the dials, that we will now be controlling the hue, saturation, and lightness for the red channel only. And even though these do work right out of the box, you can see these changes are taking place, but we're not seeing it because the properties panel doesn't switch over. So we need to be able to see the red channel and the adjustments that we're making. Well, that's where these keys will come in. We have to do a little bit of setup on this first. Let's just quickly go back to page 1. You see we all have what we call these our trigger key. So this key we want to set for this pull down menu here. So let's take our mouse, put it over top of our pull down menu here. We're going to press and hold this until we see the green check mark. Now to just double check it, we'll press it once and we can make sure that it does open that drop down, which it does. So now let's just say I'm on a different channel here, and the key next to it is the one that's going to change which channel we're in. So if we want to move to the master channel, we hit this master key and it makes that change for us. This key looks to this trigger to decide where it should make that change. So it's important that we need to take this key and make sure it's the same on every one of these pages. There's a very quick way to doing that. So on page 1 here, here's the key that we just made the assignment. So you want to make sure that you do this copy and pasting after you've made that assignment we just did. So we're going to right click on this, say copy. Then we're going to go to page 2. We're going to say paste. 3, paste. And we'll go through all of these pages here. And we're just going to paste for all 7 of the pages. The 8th, you don't need the trigger there. However, these are folders, and we'll explain what these are in a minute. They do have trigger keys inside of them as well. The same trigger keys. So we'll just go inside this. We'll say paste. Paste. Because these locations are specific to your computer, that's why you need to personalize it to where that assignment is on your system. So there, that's all of those trigger keys are now done. So now when we go back and let's go over to the red channel, you can see I want to be able to adjust my red channel, but my master is currently selected. Since I've already done that trigger key on this, I press red. It will pull open my red channel, and now I can see the adjustment that I'm making. Same thing with green. And let's go to blue. So you can quickly make your adjustments to specific parts of your image. If we swipe once more, we're into the cyan, magenta, and yellow areas. Clicking on cyan, and we can make those adjustments. Magenta, and yellow. And let's go back to our first page, or we could quickly just go to it by pressing that key. You see we have a couple other keys here. This is a reset, and this is a preview, on and off. Well, they're always in the same place. They're right down here at the bottom. So let's take our mouse over this, and I'm going to press and hold till we see the check mark, and same thing with the preview, press and hold. Now those keys are set, and if you want, you can then copy and then paste these. It'll just take you a few seconds just to paste all these. You can go ahead and finish all of those. So that anytime you want to check a before and after of your image, you can use the preview, or you can reset. Now this gives you the hue, saturation, and lightness for a particular channel, but we've also arranged them a little differently depending on how you need to work. We've also arranged them so that if we go into the hue for RGB, for example, we can now just adjust hue for the 3 different channels of red, green, blue, as well as a master hue we put on the 4th. So you can make your adjustments for just hue based on the individual channels. And we have the same thing for RGB for saturation and RGB for the lightness. So they're the same controls, but they're just grouped a little differently depending on what your workflow might be. Pressing back takes us back to the page 6 of our adjust profile, which is where we jumped from. So continuing on, we have color balance. So if we had a color balance layer adjustment, we hover over the value, select cyan red, and we can press and hold. Now that location is saved and we can make that adjustment. And you can go ahead and make the assignments for the rest of the keys should you need to use those. more effects and more parameter controls if you want to use those. And back to page 1. Now with filters, we divided them up into the specific classes of filters. So we have our blur filters that we can apply at the press of a button. And these are all folders that will reveal the different filters in each class, all grouped together. And then we have some commands related to filters. And swatches. Now what these will allow you to do is choose from a whole variety of colors that we've grouped together that you can use when you're working with digital art. So we've grouped them into red, green, blue, popular, vibrant, earth, gray, and yellow and pastel. So we have 7 groupings per color category. So when you go to each one of these, it will give you the individual colors that you can assign directly to your foreground color. And the final button here, when you have your swatch panel open, will take these 5 colors and assign them into a swatch group at the press of a button. So you can go through these and hopefully you'll find them useful. There's a different variety of colors and groups that you can use. So we touched on customizing a little bit earlier, and I just wanted to go a little bit deeper into how you can make this profile more your own and tailor it to your particular workflow. So there's a number of ways we can move things around and include some items that we haven't provided in the profile. So starting off very basically, if you just want to simply reorder items that are on a particular page, you just click and drag and these two swap places, that sort of thing. And it's very easy to move items around, so you can make your own configuration on this page. But what if I want to have this item appear on a different page? Well, there's a few ways of doing that. I can right click on this, select copy, go to the page I want to place it on, right click into an empty slot and say paste, and it pastes it into that spot. Now it still exists on my old spot, of course. If I wanted to just simply move it, I can click and drag, hover it over the page I want to target it to, and then place it into the empty slot. And now it only appears there. It has been moved from this place. Now if I want to replace an item on another page, it's the same thing where I drag it on top of that page, put it over top of that, let go, and those two items have swapped places. Now of course you can copy and paste this into a completely different profile. You can just copy and then go to the profile and paste it in there. Works the same. But what if I want to take a whole group of keys all at once? Well, unfortunately the Stream Deck does not allow you to shift select a whole bunch. You can only select one at a time. But if you have a case in which, let's go to say painting here, and in this page these are folders we've created. So they're just a folder in Stream Deck, and they contain these keys as well as the dials here. Now I can copy this, go back to my original and say paste, and I have all those items inside of this folder. So you could do that yourself if you wanted to just create a folder here, drag it, and then I can just drag and drop, drag and drop, and do that, and I could fill that folder up, and then I could say copy, and I can say paste it wherever I like. Now one other thing that I wanted to point out, we've got create layer here. Let's take it back to our 5th page. I'll take these back out, and you see I can't drag this over top of itself because it just disappears back into the folder. But what I can do is I can then copy delete that folder. It's still in my clipboard. I paste. Okay, so what if I want to take this global light? Let's say I don't use this global light. I want this to be a different action that doesn't happen to be in our profile anywhere, in any of the profiles. Well, as I mentioned earlier, we had gone through the trouble of creating almost every single action in Photoshop and created it as a menu option that exists in these keys. So if I want to, let's choose from one of these. So let's say, for example, I want to choose delete hidden layers here. So now that I have selected that in my action, when I press this key, it will perform the function of deleting any layers that are hidden in Photoshop. But of course, our icon hasn't changed. We mentioned this earlier. So you would go in to the Stream Deck library with your Photoshop icons loaded, and I can just do a search for hidden, and it will show me all the icons in my system that contain the word or the metadata of hidden. I can click on that, and there the action now matches the icon. Now you're not bound to just the layer menu. We also have them for the file, image, edit, type, select, filter, view, window, and panels, and swatches. They're all here loaded into this system. So if you want something from the type menu, they're all available here as well. Or you want something from the image menu, we have them all loaded here. So you can pick any one of these and then apply the correct icon. So that's a way, because we're aware that every artist works differently, and it'll even change between different jobs that you're doing in a particular time. Some jobs might require you to use a series of actions, and so you want to group them together into one page. And you can easily just create a new page here. So I have a bunch of new buttons, and I can also copy and paste the dial functions as well. So there's all sorts of ways for you to customize it and make it your own. We encourage everybody to do it that way because everyone works differently. And the profiles that we provide are really just a starting point. So that's it. That's version 3 of our Photoshop for the Stream Deck Plus device. Hopefully you'll find it useful in all the work that you do in Photoshop. Until next time, we'll talk to you soon.